Hey everyone, I can't see your lovely faces, but I hope you're doing well and keeping warm, and you've got a nice cup of tea or a beer or something, settling in for what should be a fascinating 90 minutes, couple of hours. So welcome to the third of our ABCD Igniter series of events, curated and produced by Always Possible for Brighton and Hove ABCD's programme for the cultural recovery. This is a Zoom webinar. So there's a chat box for ongoing responses and conversation and everything, and then like a separate Q&A box where you can ask your questions. And be aware this webinar is being recorded. It's brilliant to have you along. This event is compassionate, creative, commercial, with like a question mark at the end of the word commercial, like, is it commercial? This is the third of our series of events focused on the cultural recovery here in Greater Brighton and across our region. We're exploring how socially focused creative practices are combining with progressive, innovative, forward-looking business models to support the COVID-era recovery of our region's creative industries, so they can hopefully come out of the pandemic stronger than they went into it. My name is Chris Thorpe-Tracey. I'm editor of the Possibility Club podcast, and I publish the Border Crossing email newsletter. I think this conversation is incredibly important right now after the decimation of so many corners of our creative world everywhere. We are looking at Brighton as a microcosm, but we welcome everyone involved, and hopefully we can share some insight from a wider lens and unpick what it is to be part of the creative industry in the 21st century. I know we're currently distracted by events in Ukraine, but while that's dominating headlines, and it is a major legitimate cause for concern and thought, all this other stuff in the COVID era hasn't just gone away. The pandemic has powerfully shown us how vulnerable the creative sector can be, but also how critical for our well-being and our understanding and belonging in our communities. And how can we be better prepared for a future crisis? What strengths can we keep building on? We still need to be able to put our heads together and focus on solutions. To that end, today we've got 4 excellent panelists who will each give you a short, like a lightning talk. We have storytelling performer Wana Udobang, Richard Ainsworth, who is MD of Rodhus Art and Design, founding director of Stay Up Late, Paul Richards, who is also an excellent rock musician, although I'm not sure he wants me to tell you about that, and television presenter and art and antiques expert Michael Hogben. These 4 brilliant minds will throw you some thought-provoking, perhaps a bit challenging perspectives to spark strategic ideas and inspire and broaden your palette for thinking about your creative work and all our work as one bigger picture. That's why it's called Igniter. Let's open up this conversation. So at the end of the 4 talks, we'll have a Q&A session. If you want to put a question to our panelists during the talks, please just write it into the Q&A box down here, wherever it is. We won't be stopping for Q&As in between each talk. We'll squeeze right through to the end and do them all at once at the end. I think Richard may have to go, but everyone else is sticking around for the Q&A panel discussion. So now what I'm going to do is I'll introduce each of our speakers, and I'll ask 3 of them to give a quick 30-second headline of what their talk is going to be about. So, are we ready? Should we get going? At just 17 years old, Michael Hogben launched his first business. It was a fashion boutique, which was successful enough that it expanded to open outlets all across Kent. And he then launched Kent's first wine bar. That's proper good. And and then later his own auction house as well. Michael became an expert on the wonderful TV show Bargain Hunt after 4 of the earliest shows visited his auction rooms to sell the contestants' items, and he made such a big impression on viewers that they hired him. Michael has published 3 books, A to Z of Antiques and Auctions, 101 Antiques of the Future, and Collecting Under the Radar. And he currently appears on the ITV1 show Dickinson's Real Deal. So if you'd give us a sort of 30-second-ish précis of what you're going to speak to us about later, Michael, that would be fantastic. Welcome. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Chris. And that's probably one of the best introductions I've ever had in my life.
Oh, lovely.
You can follow me around, that's for sure. I'm going to be talking about how I think and how I feel. And that is the reason I think people should be logging into this to find out how we can motivate them to get back out of the doldrums, which I think we're all in at the moment a little bit. But I started off at 17 and I'm now nearly 70. So I'm still going and I still got the same ethic. Get up every day, get out there, think positive, say positive 3 times a day. You will always make money. Positive, positive, positive.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll be hearing from Michael later. Paul Richards' journey began when his band Heavy Load, which is an amazing punk outfit partly made up of adults with disabilities, needed to help to make sure their fans had support to attend their gigs and be able to stay right through to the end. Actually, in my own sordid music making past, I've gigged with Heavy Load. We crossed paths on the live music circuit. I think it was in Eastbourne, and I definitely remember they smashed it. They're a superb band. Paul founded and continues to run the awesome Stay Up Late organisation, which is one of the most disruptive and successful charitable projects offering social opportunities to those who want and deserve a more rock and roll lifestyle. I love that as a strapline. That's brilliant. Welcome, Paul. It's great to have you here. Please, can you outline your talk in 30 seconds or so?
Fantastic. Thanks to Chris for that lovely introduction. Yeah, we're gonna. I'm just going to talk through how we were working through the pandemic, supporting people with learning disabilities and how this affected them, but also how the spirit of punk shaped our charity, gave us our ability to not just survive the pandemic, but it actually, that sort of spirit of punk really transformed our work too. So I'm going to give you a little look into that.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul. Back in 2011, Richard Ainsworth established Rodhus, a studio to provide workplaces for creatives. Rodhus, it houses over 30 makers, designers, artists, and it's here in Brighton. And on the site, these can range from photographers and sound designers right through to woodworkers, screen printers, musicians, and people working on fashion and product design. So this is a visceral, tactile kind of creative space with people working in the real world and with physicality as much as being a high-tech design and hack space. It's wonderful to have you here, Richard, as well. Can you give us a little outline of what you're going to chat about in 30 seconds or so?
Yeah, so thank you very much. I'm going to be telling you all about how I set up Rodhus and the kind of things that happened that made me want to keep this as a factory, still making stuff and doing stuff. What happened to us sort of during the pandemic, which I'll touch on, and generally about kind of maker spaces in Brighton and my sort of understanding and why there's a real sort of problem with getting a hold of decent studio spaces in Brighton. So that's really where I'm going to be coming from.
That's fantastic as well. Thank you very much.
Right.
Wana Udobang is our first speaker. Wana gets out of having to do a sort of weird 30-second advert for her talk on the grounds that she's going to do her talk first straight away. Wana Udobang is a multidisciplinary storyteller who works at the intersection of the written word in its purest form and live performance. I'm a fan, actually. As a poet, Wana has 3 studio albums, Dirty Laundry, In Memory of Forgetting, and Transcendence, and they're all blooming brilliant. Wana interrogates in memory, familial bonds, healing and joy. Wana has been commissioned all over the world, including by Edinburgh International Festival, Deutsche Museum, Thank You Australia. She's performed her work across Africa, Europe and North America, and she is a 2021 University of Iowa International Writing Residency Fellow. I think I've got that right. Wana Udobang also runs the Comfort Food Poetry Workshop, which uses food as its instigator to inspire and create poetry that could then in turn become recipes for joy. It's such a lovely idea, that. Wana's writing has appeared on the BBC, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, The Observer and CNN. Wana curates Culture Diaries, which is an archival project to use multi-platform storytelling to document African artists. It's amazing. Wana's joining us from Lagos, so let's get going. Welcome so much, Wana. I don't need you to outline your talk. I'd love you to do your talk. It'd be fantastic. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really, really appreciate and enjoyed your introduction. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And as Chris said, my name is Wana. I'm actually here from Lagos. I'm living in Lagos at the moment, where I share my time between Lagos and London. So hello from sunny Lagos today. So as Chris did say, I am a poet, I'm a performer, and as much as many other things as well. And I'm going to be looking at the multidisciplinary nature of my poetry practice. And before I sort of start talking about some of the things that you're seeing on screen, I'm going to mention that, you know, being Nigerian, there's a running joke, and I don't know if any of you have ever heard this before, where they say, you know, our only career choices are doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant, and family disgrace, essentially. So basically, this just lets you know that when you tell your family that you're going to be an artist, or when they see that you're going to be an artist, everyone's kind of like, you know, there's a big shudder and shake about your well-being and the sustainability of your career. So it's something that kind of follows you. And as a result of that, as a poet, when I started writing poetry, I was always told that, you know, the idea originally was like, you know, you see other poets and what they do is they write books, and, you know, that's how poetry existed for me. But I started writing poems, and I found that, you know, they also said it was difficult publishing books because, you know, people don't really buy poetry books and all of these sorts of interesting things. But I'm someone who's always sort of loved exploring with art. And I often ask myself, you know, why can't I do other things with my poems? So why for me can't poetry, you know, be like painting or any of those sorts of things? And so this is how it started. And I think it was 2015, I think, where 2014, I think, where I made my first album, and it was called Dirty Laundry. And then after that, you know, I made the album, sold them literally hand to hand here in Lagos, and I saw the reaction, people enjoyed them. But what was really interesting for me was the fact that people who particularly didn't care about poetry were listening to my album, and they were like, oh, this is really cool, and this is really interesting. And then, of course, I made a second album, and I made a third album. The third album is called Transcendence, which came out in 2020. So this is how sort of a lot of my poetry career started, writing, you know, creating albums. And then, of course, there's also the performance aspect of the work as well, where I found that not just performing my poems, but because I was performing my own poems and people enjoyed them, I would find that maybe someone who'd come to my show and then maybe worked in an organization would be like, you know what, can you write a poem to suit maybe a theme of an event, or, you know, or the launch of our product, or, you know, just something different, but, you know, it was going to have to be geared towards whatever it was that they were doing in their company. And that then from there, I realized, oh, there's another angle to this, which is that I get commissioned to write poems as well. And so from there, I'd written poems for companies, for arts institutions, for festivals, and just for even individuals' birthdays and weddings. And even sadly, funerals as well. I've written commission poems for those. So I started to realize that, okay, so there was the album making in this, right? And there is the performance of my own work. And then there's also doing commissioned work as well. And then, of course, the pandemic came. And so this shut down a lot of like the physical performances because, before then I was traveling all over the world and performing. And then I was at home, like everybody else, spending a lot of time cooking, strangely. And because I was cooking, I started sharing a lot of my food on my Instagram. Sharing my food on my Instagram, I was also sharing stories underneath the food I was sharing. And from there, this idea came about around creating a workshop where I used food as an entry point into into memories and into ideas. And then, of course, like writing and creating new poems. And so this was how Comfort Food was born. And so during the pandemic, in the middle of lockdown, I started this poetry workshop called Comfort Food. And then again, I realized that my work is taking on different forms. And so for me, so this is just a photo of where when I did facilitated the workshop in Edinburgh. And since then, I facilitated it online as well as in person. So because of the pandemic, we're having to do a lot of things on Zoom. So this again was a different avenue. So it's like, I was used to workshops being these physical things, but now I could do them on Zoom as well. And of course, also get paid for them too. And this is what leads me to one of the things I really want to talk about, which is being able to create a kind of multiverse for my work. So it's not just when I think of, being an artist and being a creative, we pour so much of ourselves into the work that we do. Sometimes we're sold this myth of it's this noble thing and we're supposed to suffer through it. But I think that if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not earning a living from it, how is this work sustainable? How do we stay in the right place to continue to create this work that is compassionate, that is speaking to the times, and work that is documenting histories and our present as well. So for me, the answer to this has really been creating this multiverse of my work that includes performance, includes writing, includes commissioned work, includes poetry albums. I also think of my work existing in installations and being installed in a gallery as a poetry film, or work hanging up on walls on linen and people reading it and walking through a gallery. I also see my work, performing with musicians as well. I also see myself writing books. I've currently finished writing my first poetry collection called Thick Skin. And so it's like the work for me is literally like paint and brush, and it can exist in so many different places. And what this also means is that I can always earn a living in a sustainable way, because if I'm not, say for instance, the ways in which a lot of physical performance was shut down during the lockdown, I was able to teach poetry and of course also still do a few like Zoom performances as well. But it just showed me the possibilities of the work, and also in the licensing of my work as well. So with my albums, forever and ever, people get to keep listening to them and streaming them, which also means I get to keep making a living off poetry. So, for me, this is what is most important when we talk about compassionate, being creative, and being commercial. I'm someone who believes in the idea of an and. I don't think it has to be one or the other. We don't have to only sort of make one type of work, but we can make the work and it can exist in so many different forms. It can be very expansive. And the other thing about that, it actually makes us more creative because we're thinking of how our work can exist in so many different spaces. It becomes more exciting. You're seeing that your universe is expansive. You're seeing that your universe is abundant, and you're continuous. You don't burn out, because even when one aspect of your work doesn't feel like it's working sometimes, another aspect is very exciting to you, and it's opening something up for you that you can take back into another segment of your working life as well. So I think I'm gonna say thank you at this point. It's been very exciting to share parts of my work with you. One thing I do know, and I would say, is that if this work is beautiful work that we do as artists, and it must be able to take care of us, and we must be able to care for ourselves in the process so that we can keep giving, or else we're just, giving from an empty cup. So I will say thank you very much. And it's been great spending time with you.
That's fantastic. I don't know if everyone can see. Yeah, can everyone see me? Thank you so much, Wana. That's brilliant. So now we are going to hear from Richard Ainsworth. Are you there, Richard?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. The floor is yours, Richard.
Fantastic. Well, that was great listening to Wana's story. And anyway, good afternoon. My name is Richard, and thanks to you for setting up the Igniter event. It's really great. So I set up Rodhus Studios in February of 2011. And Rodhus is situated in a sprawling old factory on Hollingdean Road in Brighton, Brighton's very own meat packing district. Indeed, part of the site used to be an abattoir a long time ago. And the factory's set out on different levels. So it's a sprawling building. So it's totally rubbish for sort of modern lean manufacturing, but perfect for what we do, which is providing workspace for makers, designer makers, artists, and that sort of thing. People working in many disciplines, or within the creative sector. And so we've got people based here ranging from, I've got a BAFTA award-winning sound designer, photographers, ceramicists, artists, and the work here sort of constantly amazes me and surprises me, and I get to see the most amazing work before it kind of goes out into the world, and that's a real privilege for me. And so I set up Rodhus after I sold my lighting business, and so from 2005 to 2010 I was running this lighting company, and my background was in product design, which is the thing I kind of like doing, and I really hated running the business. So I sold it in 2010, had a deal which saved the employees, the buyers bought the business, and they took it into a modern factory in Shoreham and left me with this big empty space. And it's like 20,000 square feet. And about the same time, I discovered that there's a real shortage of makerspace, studio space in Brighton. And I was people were saying to me, oh, it should be sold and it should be developed and turned into whatever. And I really wanted it to carry on being a space where people do stuff and make stuff. And an important factor in my decision to do that was something that happened to me a few years before, which was before I was running the lighting company, I was working for the lighting company, and I was called in to look around a factory of a company that had gone bust. And basically they wanted to sell stuff that the receivers wanted to basically sell stuff cheap. So I walked into this old lighting factory, and it really gave me the chills, because this was basically a place where people kind of got together. It was a community that just basically up and left. And so you walked around and there was sort of calendars on the wall, there were post-it notes, and this was a place where people sort of socialized, friendships were forged, and and it was like really sad, and it really sent a sort of chill. So the experience had a massive impact on me. So when I sold my lighting business and my factory was cleared out, I was determined that my space would actually have a new life, and we'd get a new community to move in, and it would have a new life doing something else. So we followed an intense load of research, networking, doing grown-up things like building, making business plans, seeing where the competition was. And as part of my research, I went to a place called Cockpit Arts in London. And I don't know if you've heard of Cockpit, anybody, but Cockpit is, they basically, I think they call themselves the only kind of incubator for craft-based design. And they've got two sites, one's in Hogben and one's in Deptford. And if you go to Cockpit, as well as offering affordable workspace, they also mentor and assist their makers in helping them grow and develop their practice. And it's a really impressive model. And if you get the chance, go to Cockpit, because they have open studios. It's a really interesting place. So in the summer of 2010, I was coached by the Vanessa Swan, who was the then CEO of Cockpit. And it was just really to learn how to run makerspaces. And so 2010 was all about information gathering and finding out about the best way to run a makerspace. So by the start of 2011, we sort of transformed the factory, and it looked amazing, and we repainted everything. It was incredible. And February the 4th, 2011, we opened our doors. There was a sort of trickle of interest, and it snowballed. And then within 18 months, we filled all the spaces. Our first licensees were a company called Workflow Studio, photographic studio. Steady On Designs was a sort of contemporary furniture maker, and Pottery Galliano is a ceramicist. And I'm really pleased to say that all these years on, they're still here working and doing stuff at Rodhus. So my coaching at Cockpit made me realise that the aim should be to attract a real sort of diverse range of creatives as possible. That way, some really interesting collaborations can occur. And when I went to Cockpit, I saw sort of like milliners, fabric designers, printers, jewelers, and that sort of thing. So when I staggered out into Gray's Inn Road into the cold light of day, I wondered whether there was an equal pool of creative talent in Brighton. And it turns out that, of course, there is, because we've got Brighton and Sussex University just down the road, running courses in art, product design, textiles, fashion, architecture, and more besides. And then you've got 40% student retention. So I think I read somewhere that you've got this whole lot of people that come to Brighton to study and then stay on. So there's a real rich theme to draw on here. So that was 11 years ago, and over those years, it's been a real honour to have played host to some incredible makers. The majority of people who do leave our studios tend to leave because they've outgrown us. Rodhus usually is their first space from working from home, and then they come into us and they kind of grow through, and then eventually they'll kind of get too big for us and leave. And it's great to see the incredible work that goes on. And I'm born and bred in Brighton, and there's a sort of real burgeoning creative sector. So it's really great. And so the bonus of having all these creatives based here under one roof, coupled with the sort of broad variety of skills on offer, means that collaborations do occur, and people are really giving in terms of, you know, helping each other out and that sort of thing. So that's really kind of quite uplifting as well. So fast forward to 2020 with a pandemic and the lockdown, and we made the decision back then that we were going to stay open. We looked at the guidelines and thought, actually, you know, most of the people working here couldn't do what they do at home. So we carried out risk assessments, and we closed down communal areas, and we did everything we could to make the factory a safe space. So all our units are self-contained, so it was entirely possible to come into the building and work in isolation. Even so, I was concerned about the impact of the pandemic. Naturally, nobody had had this before, and had this sort of to deal with this before, and I was unsure that sort of the making community would be supported by the government in any way, shape or form, and they weren't. So in the end, during lockdown, 4 businesses moved out of the 30 plus that we have here. 2 because they absolutely couldn't work and carry on working, and 2 because they outgrew us at that stage. One was a guy that was involved with doing bar and restaurant and gym fit outs, and those places were shutting down because they had the opportunity, they had to shut down, and they had the opportunity to refurbish their kind of gym or restaurant. So this guy was doing really well and really busy. And then another company was a contemporary lighting manufacturer, who basically their online sales just went massive, and so they took on extra staff and they had to move out. So it was kind of quite a positive story. And so it was 2 years since the initial lockdown. I do remember actually when we did lockdown, initially I sort of sent a message around saying, yes, we are open, do come in and you can use the space, but people stayed away. And it took maybe about 6 weeks for people to kind of start thinking about coming back in and working. So the sort of the buzz returned after about 6 weeks. But what surprised me about the whole thing was that with the general kind of gloom and uncertainty around lockdown, people were still looking for workspace, and I still had loads of people inquiring about spaces. And so the spaces that the people that I lost, I was able to kind of get other people in fairly quickly. And I sort of still continue to receive applications to this day, people looking for workspaces and doing amazing work. And if I had one thing that is a real kind of frustration for me, is that there's not enough space, and I'm turning people away all the time, which is just really unfortunate, and it's probably the one frustration of my job. So what is it about Brighton? So why is all this creativity going on in Brighton, and there's this lack of practical makerspace? I think there's a historical problem here. For one thing, the city's prosperity was built on the sort of service, tourism and hospitality industry. And so spaces like mine, sort of factory, are thin on the ground. And there's also an orthodoxy that dictates that buildings like mine shouldn't really exist in Brighton. And so in 2013, I got Rodhus going. We've been going for a couple of years. I was contacted by a commercial property agent, and he came in and he said he wanted to buy my building. And he said to me, you know what, you shouldn't be here. This area here is where the students should be. This is where the students' flat should be. And the orthodoxy dictates that this square metre on the ground should make this amount of money. You should be in maybe somewhere like New Haven or Lancing or something like that. That's where you should be. And if you are familiar with this area, there's a lot of student accommodation going up around here. There's just kind of buildings being up everywhere as we speak at an alarming rate. Someone called it Croydon by the Sea. Gleaming towers seem to be springing up everywhere. But with all this kind of sort of febrile development going on, I'm really determined that we stay in Hollingdean Road as a sort of little carbuncle of making and a reminder of the manufacturing heritage such as it was going on in Brighton. So that's what I'm trying to do. And around the same time, I was interested in setting up a pop-up shop. So 2013, I wanted to set up a pop-up shop featuring some great makers and designer makers and people that I came across in my travels. And my plan was my pop-up shop would feature creatives, designers, designer makers, a real sort of high standard of people. And so I believe now that, and I believe then, I believe now that a lot of people that live in the city are unaware of what goes on and what goes on in Brighton and the amazing sort of talent that's around. So I wanted the pop-up shop to be somewhere central and would be a curated show that would feature some really high-end stuff. People going into Brighton's Churchill Square would kind of wander into the mall and they'd see this incredible stuff and it might inspire and really sort of educate people about what is happening locally. And there was this empty shop at the front in the mall. It was the old Lego shop, if anybody remembers it, sort of quite a few years ago. Lego had moved out, they moved to a bigger shop downstairs and left this space, this empty space. And it was like a minimalist dream. It was all white and it was a sort of long, really clean space. I thought this would be perfect for my pop-up. And I thought, great, this would be brilliant. So I approached the same guy that told me that I shouldn't be in Brighton. And I said, what's the chance of me getting that as a pop-up to do like a creative show? And he said, no chance at all. The received wisdom is that the owners would rather keep it as an empty space waiting for one of the big players like Zara and H&M to come in. So there's no chance of you getting it as a pop-up. And this was a really sort of sad realization that that's the orthodoxy again working, and I would have to change where I was going to do that. Then we did do a pop-up in the North Lanes, but it was a real wasted opportunity. The high street was looking bleak prior to the pandemic and continues in its decline. And there's a large number of empty shops in Brighton. And maybe now, all those years later, old attitudes will change and maybe people will look at sort of turning some of those empty spaces in Brighton to pop-ups or repair cafes or exhibition spaces. Things like materials libraries, that would be fantastic. But anyway, be interested to know what other people would think if they look at sort of like all these empty shops, what they would like to see them being turned into. But one thing's for sure, what Brighton lacks in makerspace, it makes up for invention and creative talent. And I really believe this will only continue to grow. So 2 years ago, we were all about to face a real challenge without knowing what was in store for us. Since then, I've seen a remarkable resilience and a will to survive with the people doing their stuff in these really uncertain times. And it's been really amazing to see this. So if you do find yourself ever in the Hollingdean Road area of Brighton, do come in and I'll give you a tour, a factory tour. I love showing off my space. But obviously be sure to email or call first. But yeah, that's my story, such as it is. And obviously be delighted to sort of obviously hear what the other speakers have to say as well. So thank you very much for listening to me. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much, Richard. That's fascinating. Particularly because that very near that site, they ended up using it as a vaccination centre, didn't they? Which is an unexpected use right in the heart of Churchill Square. Yeah. You've got a kind of a retail site right in the centre of town, and that felt very unexpected as well. It was quite impressive that they managed to do that. But Pity that it couldn't be more. Couldn't have been a few years earlier that they'd had that kind of lateral thinking.
Yeah, it slightly depresses me when I walk around that part of the world and think of what you could do to make a really exciting and sort of I don't know, just a slightly uplifting space, you know. But there you go.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
No problem.
Moving
Thank you.
on now to Paul Richards. I will leave the floor with you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'm Paul, and I'm the founder of the charity Stay Up Late, and I'm going to do a quick intro to how our charity came about to start with, and then go on to talk about some of the effect of the pandemic on people with learning disabilities and what's come out of that for us. I was in a punk band with 4 other men, and 3 of those had learning disabilities, and we were called Heavy Load. And we used to play all round, this was in the 90s, we used to play all around the country. We were quite an unusual thing. We used to get invited to play all sorts of gigs, and always at 9 o'clock, the same thing would happen. Half our audience would leave. They were generally people with learning disabilities themselves, and they would leave. And that's not because we were just about to get on stage and unleash a barrage of noise and swear words at them. It was because their support workers couldn't work late. And so we spotted this real inequality for people with learning disabilities, that many people with learning disabilities need support to go out. And if their support staff can't work late, they simply can't be part of the usual things that many of us take for granted when we socialise, like going out, see gigs, see our friends in pubs, that sort of thing. Then a weird thing happened to us. This film director called Jerry Rothwell heard about us, and he followed us around for 2.5 years and made a film also called Heavy Load. And this is a real fact. I've not made this one up. This quote from Mark Kermode: "If Heavy Load isn't in your top 5 documentaries of the 21st century, then I don't want to know." So he was a massive fan of the film, and the film sort of talks about our strange existence. But we knew that the band wouldn't last forever, and in 2012 we split up after 15 years of complete anarchy, and we started the charity Stay Up Late to carry on the work we'd started. We'd started this big conversation about the injustice of people not being able to stay up late, but I felt passionate that I didn't want to just leave it there hanging, and that I wanted to try and be part of doing something about changing that for people. And so as a charity, we now do 2 main things really. One is our volunteering programs, which is Gig Buddies and Sports Buddies, and then the other is our No Bedtimes campaign. So the No Bedtimes campaign is kind of a wider thing, trying to get local authorities to commission contracts and support that ensure that people can live flexible lives. And Gig Buddies and Sports Buddies is our practical solution. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about how they work in a moment or two. And we've been going for 10 years now. So one of the things that we did at a number of workshops and conferences was work with people with learning disabilities and ask them what they wanted from their lives, what they wanted their lives to look like. And generally it just got boiled down into these few things. And if you look at, we called it our manifesto for an ordinary life, because really it's just the things many of us take for granted as ordinary, you know, choosing where you live, who your friends are, what time you go to bed, being able to decide how you live your life, the right to having relationships, being valued for who you are, having a paid job, and having people in your life who you choose to be there. That's ordinary stuff, but a lot of this stuff isn't ordinary sadly for people with learning disabilities. So all of this has kind of underpinned our whole sort of approach to how we work, how we campaign, and what we try and do and what we try and change. So Gig Buddies was the sort of game changer for us. We started that 9 years ago in Brighton. The concept is really simple. We match up people with a learning disability with a volunteer who shares the same interests in music. And then they just go out together to mainstream events as friends. And that's the really simple concept. And we started it in Brighton, and now we run it across Sussex. But often I'm talking at sort of local authority events and things like that, and I get asked to explain Gig Buddies. And sorry, I've missed out a little bit there. This is the Flaming Lips link. So gigs are great if you love loud music, crowds, flashing lights, and mayhem like a Flaming Lips gig. But that's not for everyone. And we were really clear at the beginning of Gig Buddies, it's actually not about gigs. As much as our charities stay up late, it's not about staying up late, it's about deciding how you live. Gig Buddies, it depends what your gig is. So it can be anything. It could be classical music, football, going to the theatre, eating out, dancing, going for nature walks, absolutely anything. It's not for us to say, it's for us to sort of facilitate people to go and live the life that they want. And before we went out and sort of started up the project, we did some research with University of Brighton to find out what the barriers were to people going out. And you know, again, no surprises. What we found, some practical ones, but also stuff around people's mental health and needing support, and that not being provided. And also sort of on the back of austerity, support being cut and cut and cut. So, you know, having a social life isn't really seen as an essential part of that anymore, sadly. And now we've added COVID to that list as well. But what we also found was that there was a total desire to get out. So when I talk about the project to people from local authorities, they get really excited by this slide because it's got all this jargon in it that links to the Care Act about community capacity and assets-based approaches and stuff like that. But I always say blah 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 because that doesn't speak to people who maybe could become volunteers, and it certainly doesn't speak to people with learning disabilities. And so we set up Gig Buddies, and it's been running really well. We've got in excess of 100 volunteers all going out and doing one-to-one things all the time. We had some brilliant evaluation done, you know, that showed that actually the project was building resilience in people. They're going out more in the evenings, not just with their buddy. It was making them feel less lonely, making new friends in addition to their buddy. So all really brilliant stuff. And that's what we call serious fun, because it's doing serious stuff, but it's fun at the same time. And then we got approached by other organisations who wanted to replicate our work. So we've ended up sharing it around the UK and in Australia too. But then the pandemic happened, and there's this story of at the dance tent at Glastonbury a few years back. There was a flood, and they brought in this machine to suck out the water out of the dance tent, but the operative turned the switch from suck to blow and ended up spraying human excrement all over the dance tent. And that is how, in a sense, we felt the pandemic was for us. We were having a festival of fun, and then this happened to us, you know, in a metaphorical sense. Shit happened, and in a sense, the pandemic could have given us a real existential crisis about, you know, well, there's no gigs to go to, nothing to stay up for. What's the point in existing as a charity? But we said no to that. We really, you know, reframed what we're doing and said, actually, what we're doing is about connection and friendship, and that has never been more important than a time like this. So we reimagined all our work. Took loads of it online. We started some new projects, and we carried on regardless. And this is some of the sort of the comments from some people with learning disabilities about the impact of the pandemic on them. I've lived in supported living. I used to go on the bus on my own, but since the pandemic, all my confidence has gone. I'm quite nervous about going to nightclubs again. I'm worried that the pandemic will set people with learning disabilities back 30 years in terms of how far we've come, and they're talking about in the context of inclusion and being included and able to partake in things in the community. And I often use this quote. I think you know, we've all experienced some levels of social isolation over the last couple of years. And I'm always reminding my team of this, that this is, you know, the core purpose of our work is supporting people to feel loved, but also another great punk, I think, puts it another way, just bloody love each other properly. So I was thinking, what's a picture of resilience? But this was Michael, our drummer, when we played at Glastonbury in, I think it was 2011. It was a very muddy year, and we could have given up and said, oh no, you know, the festival's ruined, or we could just eat chips and get on with it. And that's why I love that photo. That's Michael eating chips and just getting on with it. So that's kind of a bit about our work and how it fits. And I suppose the other thing I'd say about relating it to Brighton and Hove is that we had a good idea it would work in Brighton, and all I can say is that most people are nice, and it's a very comforting thought. Most people are nice, and as we've shared it around the country, we've found the same. Most people are nice and are not pouring out bile on Twitter. So thank you very much.
That's fantastic, Paul. Thank you. I've seen the power of gig buddies at first hand, playing shows where people are there and they're only able to be there because they've got that support, and you've created lifelong friendships as well. So in all over the place. So it's amazing work. Thank you very much. And our final speaker of the lightning talks of what is now almost the evening now, not quite yet. Michael Hogben is here. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much. I will leave the floor to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I think I've unmuted myself, but I would just like to say the people before me have been fantastic. And they're obviously doing everything they can to help everyone. And I don't think I'm here to help people. I'm just here to motivate people. And my motivation in life has been, go and get it. If you want it, go and get it. Nothing stops you apart from you. I just think in the world, I was 17 when I opened my first business, and people said, are you crazy? I mean, you know, 17 and opening up a business. I had £500. Regrettably, my mother died when I was really early, when I was really young. And that sort of gave me the backup to open up this business. My dad and my stepmother went to Australia, So I was 17 years old, stuck by myself with my brother and me, and we opened up a shop called Mickey Finn. Everyone knows what a Mickey Finn is, I'm sure they do, but when you're 17, that doesn't really matter. What mattered to me was I didn't want to fail at anything I wanted to do, you know, so I wanted to be different. I wanted to get out there, I wanted to do something which was a little bit better than we had locally. And at the time we had Burton's, we had Hepworth's, and things like that. And in the end, things really panned out. People were coming into the shop left, right, and centre. They loved what we were doing. They loved what we were selling. And by the time I was 21, I had 7 shops, 30 staff, and it was just all tickety-boo, you know. But the thing is, you can have all that, but you need everything else with it as well. You need the staff to be loyal. You need everyone to be loyal. And the thing about it is, you should never really think about the money, because if you start thinking about the money, that's when you're going to fail. And so after I gave all that up, I sold the whole lot, because I thought, you know, it's not really what I want to do. I wanted to get something in a gentle trade. It was a cutthroat trade being in Mickey Finn. And some of you people out there, you probably are in cutthroat trades, and you probably are thinking, I need to make some money. I need to do this. I need to do that. But being a punk rocker is not about making money. When you're a punk, you can do anything you want to do. You know, you get out there, you do it, you get up in the morning, and you should be happy to get up in the morning. After I'd done the Mickey Finn shops, I opened up a wine bar. And the reason I opened up the wine bar, because when I was in well, Dover we were in those days, but when I go to France, I could sit down anywhere in a cafe and I could have a glass of wine and a bit of cheese. But I come back to Dover, and in those days, you know, you couldn't even have a glass of wine in a pub. It was like you open from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock, and then open up 6 o'clock to 10:30. And none of them had wine facilities. If you went in there and said, "Can I have a glass of wine?" No, sorry, we don't sell wine. After that, we got the license to have McCartney's Wine Bar, which was a fabulous place. If you lived in Dover, you'd know about it. I'm just going to get back a bit because I feel like I'm too close to it. I hope you can still hear me. If you lived in Dover, it was just a great place to be. So the French people would come over. They would come and have their glass of wine, their bit of cheese, a bit of lunch, steak and kidney pies, throw in a bit of English, I used to say. Chicken and mushroom, you can't beat it. And that was a real success, you know. But at the end of the day, it still wasn't what I wanted to do. And I got to the age of 30, and I thought, do you know what? I want something else. And look behind me, there's a bit of, oh, that way around. The bit of art there, and art was where I wanted to be, really. Art and antiques, it just got me like a kid in a toy shop. I was living in this house, and the man knocked on my door, and he said to me, exactly what you're looking at now, that picture behind me. You know that picture behind you? He said, do you want 100 quid for that? I said, why? He said, well, I'll buy it off of you. And in those days, it was the Brighton Knockers. And the Brighton boys, and this is why I come back to Brighton, were the team. They were the boys who went out there. They knew their stuff. Any antique dealer in Brighton, any art dealer in Brighton, they know their stuff, I tell you now. And I thought, why is he offering me 100 quid? And the old mind ticked over, you know, the profitability side of it. So I went to the library the next day, and I started looking up. Ethel Lucy Adams was her name, the artist. And I looked her up. You can look her up now, you'll still find her. And she exhibited at the Royal Water Society and the Royal Academy. I'm thinking, she's got to be worth more than 100 quid. And as I'm studying all this, I'm thinking, there must be more to it. There must be more art out there. So that was it. I was on the road. I was there. And after that, I started buying and selling a few paintings. I wasn't making a lot of money, but I'd buy a few. I'd buy them in the provinces, and I'd take them up to London. And I had a good connection with a big company up there called Thomas Agnew and Sons, which was probably one of the top dealers up there. And one of the people I met in there was a man called Mr. Plummer, I think his name was. But I took a James Baker Pine oil painting. Might not mean much to you, but it meant a lot to me at the time. And he was one of the only people who kept a complete reference of all of his art. So if you go to the Victoria and Albert Museum now and say, could I have a look at the archived works of James Baker Pine, they would get this massive book out, and it would be numbered, and it would be where he painted it, who commissioned him. And that was just the charm of art for me, to find out that someone could actually log all that and who commissioned it. And I found out that commissioned this painting of Italy was Thomas Agnew's dad. So obviously they were interested in buying it back. There again, I made a profit. And from that, I just kept going and going. I thought, you know, this is such good fun to trade. So I opened up an auction house. And that was even better because when you went into an auction house in those days, there was no internet bidding. It was, you know, just you go in, you put your hand up and you're buying it. So I just thought, I want to open one of these. It was just such fun for me. So I opened up the first auction room in Folkestone in the tin shed. Well, it was a tin shack really, but more like a shed. And it became very, very successful because if you work hard and you've got the ethic of working hard, even in these times of pandemics and everything that's going on in the world, if you can say to yourself, I'm up in the morning, I want to do something. You don't have to stay in bed. You don't have to sit indoors. You just want to do something. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to keep this and I wanted to make it successful as I could. And it kept going and going and going. And I made it a real success. We had 25 staff. We had the television companies coming up to us saying, can we film you there? And I'm like 50 years old. I'm thinking, well, it's a bit late in life to be on the telly, but there you go. These things happen. And I met my pal, David Dickinson, who was a friend of mine before that anyway. And he was doing bargain hunt. And all of these experts on the telly, they do know their stuff, trust me. Some of them are very knowledgeable. People like Philip Serrell and God rest him, David Barbie, very good friends of mine. Braxton, James Braxton, you know, they do know their stuff. And I was in with them and I realized then that I haven't even been to university. I haven't even been to art college. I haven't even studied this, but I actually knew enough to sort of compete with them. And you learn your trade through the street. You know, you learn your trade. You either go to university and learn a trade or you learn it on the streets. I'm a street boy and I learned mine on the streets. And I still feel proud of what I did with that auction room. You know, I sold it in 2004. We had the television company come in and they liked us so much, my family, that they did a program, BBC One, called Auction Man. And that was a primetime television show, which was incredible. But I mean, it was like being the first reality star because it was 2003 before Only Ways Essex, before these ones were out now. But they followed me and my family around, my wife Leslie and my daughter Emily, for 6 months. And wow, I mean, take it from me, that's pretty stressful. But at the end of the day, we had a good bit of fun about it. And a nice program came out and it was very popular. And from that, they asked me if I'd write a few books, which I wrote 3 books. And thank you for promoting that earlier. I might even get a bit of royalties because when you write books, you don't get royalties, you know. They say to you, oh, yeah, you know, you'll do really well out of this. You'll make a lot of money out of it. But no, you don't, trust me. I think I sold like 20,000 books and ended up with like 4 quid out of it. But I'm sure there are people who do make money out of books, so I shouldn't say that meaningfully. That's just a bit of fun. But there are, you know, there was good perks out of it. So I wrote those books, they came out, and then we went on to do a bit more television. And then I thought I'd made enough money to retire. And actually I hadn't. I had to go back to work. So at 60, I opened up another sale room. During that time, my wife and I got married 22 years ago. And one of my best friends is Vic Reeves, and you probably know him on the television for his work with Bob Mortimer, but to me, he's Jim Moyer, and he's a very good artist. And 25 years ago, when I first met him, he gave me some pictures which he'd drawn, and I said, you know what, Jim, these are really good. You should do something with them. He said, oh, I'm on telly, you know, I don't need to be doing that. But he always had this passion for art, and all of his shows, if you look at all of his earlier shows, all of the art in the background was all Jim's work. And as things progressed, you know, we were getting, well, we've been friends for a long time. We drink a little bit together and we play a lot together. Excuse me. And I said to him, why don't I be your art agent and see if I can start selling your art? And about 8 years ago, this was. And I was sort of getting not fed up with the auction room, because you never get fed up with being an auctioneer, but the charm was going out for me. It was a bit mundane. I wanted another challenge, really. And he said, yeah, why not? You know, and he was with a company then. I said, well, take it out of there, give it to me, and I'll see what I can do with it. And I think he was doing probably, you know, just about 4 or 5 figures a year. But the art was not being promoted properly. So over the last 8 years, we've now taken it to a very, very, very successful art world. We have exhibitions in London, we have exhibitions in the Royal Academy, Jersey, Manchester, Newcastle. And the thing what's done it is the website. And we've got a website now called vicreeves.tv. And that really has become the retail world. The retail world is history. I would hate to have a high street shop. And all the people who are saying like, oh, well, this is that and this is that. But trust me, nobody goes into shops anymore. I walk in around Canterbury and it's almost like derelict. Everything seems to be closing down. And this is all because of the pandemic. Will it come back? I think it will, but it's going to take time. And if you are sitting at home now thinking, what can I be doing with myself? Open a website, do a website, put yourself out there, you know, do all this Instagram and all this TikTok and all that. That's where the money is now. And I'm pleased to say, I don't make loads of money, but I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it to be happy. And I'm very happy. I wake up happy, I go to sleep happy. And people say to me, well, how can you do that? I just say to yourself, be positive. Take everything positive and no negativity in your life. And everything which you think is a negative, turn it into a positive. Trust me, it'll work. And I can't offer, you know, a lot of what these other speakers were offering, but what I would say to you is, I do my bit for charity and I would help any charity. My profile has given me the opportunity to do charity work. And I do it under the background. I do it in the sidelines. We do a lot of charity auctions. And over the years, I've raised money for Nelson Mandela, Richard Branson, cancer. I would support cancer until it comes out of my ears. My mother died of cancer when I was 7 years old, and my mother-in-law died of cancer, and that was a year ago, and that really is painful. So I will help anyone I can. If anyone's out there and they want a charity auctioneer, that's my gig. Give me a shout. I'll finish it on that, and so I hope I've helped you somewhere along the line.
Oh, thank you, Michael. That's amazing. Really made me think as well, coming out of the music world or the performance side of the arts, that we spent the years before the pandemic getting so excited about digital stuff and so excited about live work as opposed to what used to be the product, which was physical albums and singles. And they kind of went out the window. So many artists were touring for their living and or putting all their music on the internet. But the point you make, when you make the point about mail order, which you made in reference to retail, which is basically if you've got a good website and you can sell to your network a physical product, that is and it does make me think about almost the resurgence in physical products for things like music and for performance art somehow, like the vinyl revival or published books or CDs or whatever.
But you can see my vinyl machine behind me.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but I love a bit of vinyl. When Jim was on the telly, he was on there most days. After that, it all closed down. 2 years, there was nothing going on. And the creativity in him never stopped. He's become like almost, he wakes up every day painting from 6 in the morning till 6 at night. He's creative, you know. And if you create, you'll always find an outlet for creation. Being an artist is not like you don't, you know, you just get better at it. It's like a diamond. You chip away at your talent and your diamond will become more polished. And at the end of it, you should be a complete diamond with loads of facets. You can't just settle on one genre. You have to graze on many things before you become that talent, you know. And that anyone who thinks they haven't got that talent, forget it. You've got it. You just haven't developed it yet. Just keep going. You'll find it.
I think it's amazing what you've done with Jim, because even though you're sort of saying he's best known for being on the telly, which he still probably is, if you'd asked me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I would have known nothing about him as an artist. But actually now he is pretty well known as an artist, and he goes on art things as well, and he is taken seriously as an artist. So you've done an amazing job there.
Thank you. And that was my job to do that. And that was my challenge. And I said to him, I will put you in the Royal Academy. I will put you in the Margate Turner. Because I was passionate about his art. It's beautiful, and even Prince Charles likes it. Between me and you.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah, exactly, and a lot of other people. People like Damon Hirst collect his art, Noel Fielding. I mean, there's some mega collectors out there. I never talk figures, but let me tell you, he's very, very, very successful.
Do you think he's more successful from art maybe than from TV, or do you think it's the mishmash?
Definitely more successful from art in the last 4 years. Television for Jim is, how can you say it really? You know, when you go through, I mean, he started off in television. So that was his art then. He's always created art. Yeah, I think it's difficult to say. He doesn't do a lot of television now because he's getting a little bit older.
Yeah, it almost does art related TV. Saw because he was on Grace and Perry doing art there. So the last time I saw him on telly, it was about his art.
Yeah.
It's a very different example, but I heard this astonishing stat the other day that the filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola, who is obviously this legendary filmmaker, made Godfather and Apocalypse Now. He's got a vineyard in California, and he makes more money from his vineyard each year than the entire amount of total money he earned from making his entire film career.
Wow.
And yet he's regarded as one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and yet he's basically, the vineyard is what did it for him.
That's incredible, isn't it? That's incredible. I think Jim makes a lot more money out of art now than he's ever made out of television.
Yeah, I bet he does.
We've got some big shows coming up in London, Mayfair. We've got a nice one in the CCA Gallery in Jersey. And Brighton is one of those places which is very, very special to me. One, I support the football team. Don't know why, they always seem to lose. But the other thing is, my wife and I went there 30 years ago when we first met. And we had our courting days down there. So I love Brighton.
Oh, that's really nice.
And
so we've been joined by the whole panel again. Oh, there's the wine. Everyone's back with us. That's fantastic. If you're watching and you've got any questions you'd like to ask the panel, please throw them into the Q&A box and I will pass them on to the panel. I'm going to start with a question that we had earlier on from Polly Gifford, which was a question for Wana. Wana, you already kindly answered it in the box, but I'd love you to repeat maybe elaborate on your answer a bit, if you can, and then I'll throw it open to the other panelists as well, because it works as a question for everyone. Polly asked you if you thought the responses had the responses of artists to the pandemic been different in Nigeria to the UK, but of course you've worked all over the world, so have you found in particular different areas artists responding differently?
You know, I think the pandemic hit a lot of people so hard on both sides. So even in Nigeria and the UK, and it was for the first time, it really made me understand that we've just been generally taught that there is only one way to be an artist and one way to create art for a very long time. In fact, I almost feel like a lot of artists took pride in this sort of hardcoreness of like, you know, I'm not making money and I'm doing this, and you know, there's a whole like prestige to it, and that's almost how it felt on both sides, because I feel like for artists in the UK, some people still had some grants to lean on or some government intervention, but then you had in Nigeria, we don't really have very much artistic intervention in that regard from the government or from institutions. So a lot of people were really, really struggling, and those who could find ways to do other things did, but it didn't feel like there was any sort of deliberate way in which their practice was expansive, where you could see them just sort of like rolling into something else or rolling into another aspect of the work instantly. It just didn't feel like that at all. It really felt like everyone was struggling.
Does anyone else want to add to that about their own region or anything they've experienced internationally? I mean, obviously the underlying point there is about a social safety net, isn't it? The creative end of the social safety net, and we could talk about the government response and whether it's good or not. But we did, compared to a lot of other countries, we did get a social safety net response here. We did get money. It wasn't. I'm not saying it was in perfectly evenly handed out or whatever. I'll make no political whatever. But it is interesting that we had some and lots of places didn't.
Weren't artists and makers encouraged to retrain in different things?
Wasn't it in cyber?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. So I mean, I was talking to we have a period tailor based here who's quite young. You know, he's only in his 20s, and he basically is really skilled at what he does. And we were talking the other day about the fact that, well, I mean, yeah, cyber came up and it would be an impossibility, really. So it was a bit of a myth, really, I think.
Yeah, an unrealistic expectation of people to suddenly just do something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of industries really shut down. I think especially for performers, theatre people, it was just, it was very, very bleak, I think, on all sides in the UK, in Nigeria. A lot of theatre companies or performances were trying to stage things online. And that was always very touch and go because people weren't really sure. And I think a few months into lockdown, people were also exhausted from just being on the internet in that kind of way as well. So it was. I think it's something that particularly artists weren't prepared for, because people in other fields, who were, say, selling products could just move online and sell their products online, right? But a lot of artists had never really thought of the work that they generate or create as products in that kind of way. And so even just transitioning into, because I remember I released an album in the middle of the pandemic or in the middle of lockdown. So again, I wasn't consciously thinking of it, but it was like, okay, there's income being generated from an album here. I started a workshop and there's income being generated from a workshop as well as still doing like online performances, which weren't as much as they used to be. But I felt, and then I, of course, had commissions to do other writing work as well. So it just, actually, I think for me, the pandemic opened my eye into things I was already doing without really thinking consciously, and because that's just my general mode of working anyway. But it made me more aware that, the different things I was doing was almost like product creation of my creativity and my arts.
There's a good follow-up question that would work with this from Richard, which is, do you think the free or subsidised business support offers, both the advice and the grant funding, Richard's asking specifically about Greater Brighton, but obviously nationally and internationally would be interesting as well. Does that side of the equation really understand the creative or the maker or the arts sector and vice versa? Do you think there's enough understanding? And if so, if not, what needs to change so that different parts of this world understand each other better? Does anyone want to? I don't want to throw that aggressively at one panelist, but
well, I'll say to you on there that it's not only the arts which suffered, and the whole world suffered with this pandemic. It's not one section of it that suffered. Everything suffered. And what the government have done is try to help as many people as they can. And I think the people who have been helped would not have survived without it. The people who haven't been helped are the ones who have lost out. And you can't differentiate between the arts, the singers, the performers, the retailers, the jewelers, the silversmiths. You can't, people will be people. People will make their own way in life, whether they've got help from the government or not. When I never had any money, I was hungry. So that's when I used to work harder. So I don't think it makes people lazy giving them a grant. Everyone got 10 grand here, 15 grand there. It doesn't make them lazy, but it does give them a little cushion or a little blanket to keep them warm at night. And I think it does take away, often, not to everyone, but it does take away their get up and go. The get up and go is what you need in this life to make things happen. It's not about a grant here and there. It's about what you do with your life, really, I think, personally.
Well, the initial lockdown, when the initial lockdown happened, I had people come to me that were based here, and they were saying, I'm really worried about whether there were people, maybe jewelers or whatever, coming here saying, I'm really worried about what's in store. I'm just letting you know, my work's all dried up. And what happened was that people were then being put on furlough and were sitting at home, and they couldn't go out to restaurants or to spend money or whatever. So essentially, people did have a bit of sort of income coming in. So what was happening, people were then spending money on things like jewelry or things to make them feel better, because it was all pretty miserable out there. And so a lot, and art. So some of the artists that were based here, again, people were, sat at home, kind of couldn't go out. So so the kind of the thing shifted between being quite depressing and quite kind of gloomy in the first instance of the lockdown to being actually, we're really busy. I've got loads of stuff online, and people, because people can go to the shops, people can buy stuff. So they were kind of then doing it that way. So there was a real shift between those very early days of lockdown and then to people realizing actually, there's a new way of kind of consuming and buying stuff. So there was a difference, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. That makes sense to me. I think people were bidding online, going online. At my auction house, we used to have 50 people in there for every auction. Now we don't have anyone in there because it's still all online. The whole world's flipped on its belly in some ways.
Yeah, which often changes power bases really quickly as well, doesn't it? It's who's got the power in a project or in an experience has shifted radically because of this. There's a follow-up question here for Richard from Polly. She asks, have you or could you track the social value of your business and the impact it has alongside the commercial value?
I haven't, and I should do. So it's it's a good question. I guess that the whole kind of point about I suppose it's that business of a community, and Rodhus itself has kind of evolved and developed over the kind of the 11 years that we've been going, and there's a complete, so from where we started and the whole kind of intake of people that came in to where we are now, which is a completely different, it looks completely different. There are some people that were here from the start. So in terms of I guess it's about the whole business of the community and building that community, and the whole value of that. I mean, I haven't sort of done any sort of academic study in it at all, and it's something I think that it's almost like I use the word organic, but the whole Rodhus thing is a kind of, it's organic, and it kind of changes. I haven't really looked at that aspect of it, and it's something that I should possibly look at in a bit more detail, because obviously for me, the whole thing has been about building the studios and about filling the spaces, and that's been the prime directive for me, really. But it's a good thing to look at, actually, I think.
I've got a question here for. Oh, thank you, Richard. Sorry. I just moved straight on without acknowledging.
Well, actually, I tell you what, I'm going to have to love you and leave you now, because I have to be somewhere else. So I will take this opportunity now of saying goodbye. It's been great to meet you all and to hear your stories. So I just want to say that, and thanks, Chris, for facilitating. It's been brilliant.
Thanks for being here, and I'm really glad you got to stay for your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Bye, Richard.
Bye. Cheers. Bye.
Paul, I've got a question for you from Paula Unicorn, who asks, Paula says, I have a project to help people with disabilities, and your experience is similar to what's occurred in my location. I love your idea of gig buddies. Please, could you say how you enlisted the volunteers? Have you been able to involve local authorities? And could you possibly expand on how you're able to obtain necessary funding? That's 3 questions in one.
Yeah, quite well. The volunteers thing, again, going back to that thing of most people being nice, we recruit them quite a lot through gigs and, sort of music connections. So some of them have come to us as people who've perhaps been support workers or are support workers and want to change things, but generally it's just people who've got a desire to do something. And the kind of idea behind the project really was, how can we make volunteering as easy as possible? So if you can make something that somebody would ordinarily go out to anyway, a volunteering opportunity, by enabling someone to go with them, then that's a sort of a bit of a win-win situation, really. So that's how, and then it sort of grew, and word of mouth and everything. In terms of getting local authorities involved, we have in the early days, well, we get some funding from Brighton and Hove and West Sussex County Council. And in terms of sharing gig buddies in other places, we've actually got like local authorities at the moment in the Midlands and the West Country, who are, and in Yorkshire, who are actively commissioning gig buddies as a model for supporting greater inclusion in their areas as well. So they've actually sort of completely bought into it. And as for funding, you know, that's just an ongoing struggle, I think, for anyone working in our sort of sector. You know, is trying to, you know, applying for grants and trusts and that sort of thing, and looking for other ways to get more funding in. And I think I'm very interested in the idea of social prescribing and how that's grown, and how we can perhaps really present gig buddies as a very good model for social prescribing. We supported another charity in Brighton to set up a sister project called Gig Buddies for Good Mental Health. So that's working with people who've got mental health issues that prevent them from going out. You know, and the health benefits are great, but people are having fun at the same time. You know, we're not sitting people around in a group and saying, right, how lonely do you feel? Let's all talk about how lonely we feel. We're just doing something really practical, going out.
Yeah, good on you.
That's amazing. I've got a lovely question here from Lucy, which is a bit more personal. I'm going to ask the whole panel. How have you personally maintained your energy, enthusiasm and focus during this time, during the lockdowns and during the sort of this just period of great uncertainty? And have there been positives that you'd like to talk about? Obviously, it goes without saying that it's been very difficult for lots of people. Shall I start with Michael? You
Really?
seem to have maintained. Yeah.
I go to sleep happy and wake up happy. I just
That's
can't
brilliant.
help it. How do I maintain it? Peace of mind, really. Just being happy in yourself, really. Think of your body as a temple, and what you put in is what you'll get out. So if you feel happy in yourself, you're going to be happy going out. And talk to people with a smile. You know, don't talk about the bad bits, talk about the good bits. Always see the good bits in life, don't see the bad bits. I mean, your charity, which you do for the disabled, I think is fantastic, man. I think that is just brilliant. Well done. And those sort of things would cheer me up in the morning. If I had something like that going on in my life, I would be as happy as you are. And I can tell you're a happy man. There's nothing to be unhappy about, is there? You're only unhappy when you want to be. That's me, anyway. How about Chris? Tell me about yourself. What makes you happy?
I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to have to answer any questions, so
Well, go for it. We're asking you.
I'm a very optimistic person. I think my health after the initial dip of the first lockdown, I think I've done myself a lot of good over the subsequent 2 years by walking loads. So I became a walker. I'm still not a runner or anything. I'm not a fit
Don't
fit
you
person.
slip up with that.
But walking became a treasured thing, and like, you know, when the first lockdown happened and we all were allowed out for a fixed amount of time for a walk, I didn't do it. I was just staying at home for days and days on end. Hardly.
I disobeyed orders. I was just a punk rocker there. I just went out when I wanted to and went for a walk. And I didn't take any notice of it because I just thought, you know, it is what it is, really. You can be told so much in your life. It's like being at school, isn't it? I never did take it. I left school at 15 and that was it. I'm over it, you know. So I didn't believe any of that. I didn't stay in.
You have an anarchic spirit.
Yeah, oh, I like that. Thank you. I'll take it. Yeah. I never wear a mask. I never. Nah. I mean, only because I've got breathing problems anyway, because I used to smoke. I started smoking when I was 8 years old and gave up when I was 50. So I like puff and
Wow.
pant like a Billy sometimes. So I can't, I'll be like that all the time. So I never wore a mask. But no, I suppose bike riding was good for me. I live on the seaside, so we got a bike and we got a beach hut as well. So we used to go there and have a cup of tea and ride back, and that keeps your energy going, But we had to close our auction room. We had to close all our businesses down for probably 10 months of those 2 years because nothing was going on. So it wasn't easy for everyone, really.
No, that's true. Wana, how do you feel you maintained your enthusiasm and energy and focus? I mean, you actually put out work during that time.
Which was really strange because I didn't even think I was going to be doing that much work. But I think it really sort of made me very reflective, considering also people were dying as well. So there was a rearrangement of things that were important to me. So even as much as I was working, my work took on different meaning as well. I really was striving to just really build incredibly meaningful relationships with the people in my life, from my friends to my family. I think that was what I was really sort of holding on to, because it was a very weird time. Literally felt like zombie apocalypse type situation. So I think it was really about just like, and then I think there was also this idea around stillness as well. So again, we come from this, the world was very fast paced, was like, what next? And then you have this moment where everything has to be on a standstill. So it was also acquainting myself with the stillness of it all. And it's something I've actually, now that we're not quite out of the pandemic, but I'm still trying to hold on to that spirit of stillness and calm and sort of slow living, because I felt like it was really rejuvenating for me.
Stillness is such a poet's answer.
Like it.
Paul, what about you?
Well, I mean, like in terms of like the charity, I think, look, just have an incredible staff team. They all just set about, the work at hand. And that was a good way of keeping going. But I think from a personal perspective, living in Hove, it's a lovely spot. I avoided the seafront. The seafront was absolutely rammed full of people all trying to walk. So I just headed for the Downs. I've got a little dog called Nobby. So me and Nobby would just be up on the Downs every evening for all that lovely weather. My son bought me a little gas stove for Christmas, little tiny little one. So sometimes take our dinner up on the Downs and cook that up there. And I spent maybe three nights a week up at Chankton Brewery Ring, just sort of walking up there, sitting up there, having a brew, and looking around, walking through the woods and stuff. And I think, we are in a lovely spot where we live. So doing that, and it almost became a treat to myself, like 5 o'clock on a Friday, I'd down tools and head off up to Chankton Brewery Ring and see what was up there. And saw some lovely things as well, badgers and woodpeckers and deer and all sorts of things. I'm also a bit of a great potterer, so because the family with my two oldest kids are at university, so they were forced to live back with us, and I'm just pottering and faffing about at home, those kind of things. Kept me going.
Related to that, lovely, perhaps the final question from Polly. She focuses in on compassion. Said it came to the foreground during the pandemic, which is true, and definitely we've seen communities re-engage with themselves and become much more compassionate, at least for a time. How do we keep compassion there, because commercial pressures reassert themselves, and we still need to kind of compete, and we need to be entrepreneurial and try and succeed, and all of those things. Is there a space for compassion, and do we keep that sense?
Okay, I can go because I think I've also answered the question in the chat as well. I think, you know, I'm a believer in a life of and. So this is part of my whole ethos of possibility and you know, being expansive, which is a life of and what I mean by that is it never has to be or, right? So you don't have to sacrifice being compassionate to earn a living or, you know, or to do something else. For me, it can be and. So we can do our work in ethical ways, compassionate ways, and still be able to care for ourselves. Because I think for me, that's what money is, right? It's not, I see it as this thing, it's a tool that helps us do the things that we need to get done, that helps us care for ourselves and care for each other because we need to be able to afford things. And so I think for me, that's compassion it's intertwined in the ways in which we live our lives. And so I think the question now is, how do we keep compassion at the forefront or integrated into every fabric of our lives, how we work, how we deal with people, how we work with people, not just in our own work in itself, right? And how we treat people. So this is how it has to be integrated into the fabric of who we are. And I think that's the way that it can keep going without having to think that it's something that is in competition or in struggle with commerce or in struggle with, you know, with anything else.
That's brilliant, Wana. Thank you. Michael, I was going to throw to you because you have the kind of entrepreneurial pirate spirit about your work. And I wonder do you think that sometimes squeezes compassion out, or do you think compassion can be as big a part of that as it has become post-COVID?
You know, that's a really difficult question. I can't really answer that, to be honest with you.
That's cool. Paul?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, our work, we try and be all about compassion. But like Wana says, you know, it's kind of, I think, you know, me going up to the Downs after work was also realizing about the self-care stuff. It was intense at times. I mean, the pandemic, you know, when we were recreating work, it felt at times like listening to My Bloody Valentine turned up to 11. You know, that was the sort of experience. It was just a bit too much at times. So that taking that time out, being compassionate to yourself. Our work obviously is all about compassion, but I think going back to some of the earlier themes that came out as well, one of the things that we were really became aware of is the amount of people who weren't digitally included at all. So I think that's an important thing for us to remember as well, that whilst we've sort of almost made an evolutionary jump in terms of the way we work and behave and sell and that sort of stuff, there will be people who are left behind, you know, and we've got to think about them as well and bring them along.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. We got another question in, so if you're happy with me rolling with another question, this is from Steve Wyburn, who asked the panel, do you feel that, I have to say, I'll just interrupt myself to say that I'm surprised, I'm finding these questions very kind of esoteric and almost kind of big world picture type questions. And what I was expecting from this event was lots of kind of quite more technical questions about, who should we go to get this thing, but I love that this has become almost quite philosophical. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but we are at that's the way the world is.
It's fine. A good thing. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, so it is, and maybe that is one of the things about what the changes is. We are all in a different way. All of our brains have been changed, haven't they? All of our ways of thinking have been challenged and sometimes confirmed and sometimes not. Anyway, sorry, back to Steve Wyburn's question, which is, does the panel feel that the world will be able to continue and thrive post-pandemic, that is, with the internet, or will we become more together-centred and human-centred? So I think he's sort of making a binary that I don't necessarily agree with, which is either we're all around the fire sitting in a room together or around a campfire, or we're all online communicating that way. But Do you think that feel that we will err in one of those, lean in one of those directions as creative people, as people building creative businesses?
I think we should
Michael?
have avatars, and they should go out and do our business for us. And we can sit here and just have fun. But I don't think it's going to change the world that much, really. The pandemic has changed the world, and as it is now, is what it will be forever. We will never go back. You can't go back in life. You can only go forward. So you've got to take what's coming, not what's gone. And if you look at it like that way, that's where you got to live now. Look to the future, not to the past.
So it's really funny because a friend of mine and I were having this conversation some days ago, and she was just like looking online again, and she says, wow, like the world is, people have gone back to being normal. I thought we were all going to be decent human beings, you know, because of the pandemic. So unfortunately, I feel like I have a sad answer for that, which is like humans are still going to human after all. You know, I think we were all like really like emotionally heightened in the middle of like lockdown, and you know, we had all these like internal shadow work that we're doing on ourselves and wanted to change. But I feel like the more the world is stabilizing in some way, or we're adjusting to this new normal, people are kind of going back to some old behaviors, I think. So as much as I would have wanted it to change a little bit more, I don't know. I don't know.
Paul, do you have a thought on that?
Well, I mean, just in terms of the stuff about digital and that, you know, you get the term digital inclusion, but I always think, you know, like the internet is a brilliant tool, but I think it's better to think about digitally aided inclusion. I'm thinking like the most important thing is us meeting with people and communing with people and stuff. And if we can use the internet to do that, that's brilliant, but it's not the end in itself, I think.
Absolutely.
Got an interesting question here from Richard, which is, when have you persuaded a naysayer or a doubter to change their mind, or to take a chance on something creative or risky or experimental, and how did you do it? That seems like a biggie to me. That's a tough question.
Yeah, I'll pass on that one.
I think I always have a playful, a sort of playful demeanor to trying to convince people to do things, right? So for me, it's always just have a go and try or play. I tell people to play with things. I think when we take away the pressure attached to things or the expectation, people are more inclined to try things out. So that's the way in which I've sort of spoken to people about trying out things or getting in touch with things or changing their minds about certain things. It's really been about sort of playing, thinking about it as play. And if you don't like, I'm always like, if you don't like it, it's fine, you know? Where I think we're always, the way society has sort of trained us, we're very attached to the outcome, even before we attempt doing things. And so once we can't see or fathom what it's going to look like or us being in control of it, it becomes scary. And so we double down on our ideas by sort of being aggressive towards things and towards trying out things by then saying, this is not who I am, or that's not the way I do things. You know, we come up with all these stories for ourselves that keeps us in sort of the same fixed position. But I think when you're encouraged to play, or just the idea of trying without pressure, without expectation, I think people are more inclined to do things or to change their minds.
I think too. I think like maybe people find me a bit infuriating. I'm quite a determined, single-minded person at times, and it's just made me think about once with the band we were offered the opportunity of the movie was going to be on US TV, and there was the opportunity to go out there and sort of launch that on US TV, and I said, I think it'd be a really good idea to do a gig then, you know, and I'd never been to America in my life, let alone like take a band, people who learn disabilities, over to America and do a gig in New York, in a place I'd never been to, and knew nothing about the venues, you know, and people saying that's a crazy idea, but maybe it was just kind of ignorance, my ignorance and single-mindedness, that I just thought, no, it can't be that hard. I'll just email some places and we'll work this out, and managed to make it happen. But you know, I don't know if that's an answer, but
it is.
That's how I sort of convince people, perhaps, just getting on with it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love.
I wanted to also add another thing for me is just meeting people where they are. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, you know, people can feel intimidated by something, and we never want to admit that. And it's just meeting them where they are, you know, and it allows them feel, it's like leveling the ground, and it allows them feel like they're invited to be part of something.
I think that's perfect. It ties in with what Michael said a minute ago about leaving the kind of the avatars or the robots to do the business while we come offline and play and have our lives with each other. And perhaps one of the answers to that question is that you don't convince people to do things out of their comfort zone or to change their minds on things online on social media. Very, very rarely do we ever get a debate that ends satisfyingly to anyone on Twitter or on the internet. Whereas if we're in a room with people, if we've let that happen over there and we're in a room with people without that pressure, and it becomes a true social experience where we're with people, that's the moments where people are convinced to try something brave or to change their minds. And maybe that is a more, I mean, this is probably quite fantastical still rather than true to life near future, but I love the idea of, I love what you said, Michael, about the business happening away. We could almost create robots to do all the business and to do all of that stuff, and then we could exist as a playing thing. And I realise we're not there yet, but definitely if we could balance the online world and the technical world and the business world with creative play in that way, where creative play becomes what we do with our time, and that however that looks, that would be an amazing way forward. And that would, in a way, that would also keep compassion at the forefront, because we'd be interacting with people all the time, face to face. Be amazing.
Yeah, very true. You've got to be nice to do business with people in this world, and if you're not nice to each other, then who can you be nice to?
Well, and also the minute you're face to face with people, it gets rid of false binaries about what people are like. Like, there are loads of people in the real world that we might disagree with about certain things, or they might not be like us. But then the minute we're actually communicating, it's great, and they're really nice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think most of the business I've ever done is only with people I like. I will not do business with people I don't like. I've actually turned people away.
That is the best business, I have to say.
Exactly. If you don't like them, don't do
work
it.
with people you like. Yeah. And your gut always tells you anyway.
Oh, that's true.
Your gut
always tells you anyway. Yeah, I think it's really about like keeping the humanity and the emotion at the core of who we are, right? And connecting. And it's that thing about what Michael says, like we have to go in and feel each other and play with each other and be human with each other.
Exactly. I'm gonna go and have me fish and chips now.
Oh, beautiful! I could really do with fish and chips.
We've got the best chip shop in Kent down here.
Oh, nice.
I'm booked in for 6:30, so I hope that's not being rude.
No, I think we will draw things to a close. It's perfect timing. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It has got quite philosophical and esoteric, but that's great. It's been really wonderful talking to you and hearing your talks. It's been brilliant. So,
yeah, you too, Chris, and well done for hosting it. You've done a great job.
Oh, thanks. So we are out of time.
Yes, you're an amazing moderator.
Well, that's very kind of you. So I will do the sign off and I'll try and do it semi-professionally. Now you've flattered me into amateurism. I'm all confused.
Yeah, go for it. Give it your best shot.
I will. Thank you so much to our four speakers. We've heard today from Wana Udobang, Richard Ainsworth, Paul Richards, and Michael Hogben. It's fantastic. Thank you also to Stephanie Danvers and Annie Marie Page and Richard Freeman and the whole team at Always Possible, who curated and produced this whole event series. Our final ABCD webinar, the fourth one I think, the last one, will take place on Wednesday the 16th of March. It's at 4:30 p.m. again, 4:30 p.m. again, same time. That one's going to be called Clusters, Communities and Co-working Spaces. The recordings of all four ABCD events in this series, along with just a huge list of useful resources and loads of other stuff, is on the website cultureinourcity.com. That's cultureinourcity.com. I'd really recommend checking it out. There's loads of good stuff there. These events are supported by the UK government, Brighton Hove Council, and the European Union. Remember them? There's an evaluation form as well. You either so this evaluation form, if you're here watching, you either have already got it or you will get sent a link for it. I don't know whether they've sent it to you yet, but you will get it or you have got it, and it will take just 2 minutes. It's really quick to contribute your thoughts. So please fill it out if you can. It helps the funders know this was good value, and it helps, basically, we can learn what you'd like to see going forward from these kinds of events. If you're more interested in finding out about Always Possible's work, they are at alwayspossible.co.uk. It's alwayspossible.co.uk. I always feel a bit cheesy reading out website names twice, but you've got to do it because you remember it the second time, so I'm going to do it every time. I must plug the podcast. Each week, the Possibility Club podcast asks a different guest who's in a leadership role 5 big questions. The show is hosted by the boss of Always Possible, Richard Freeman, and guests have included politicians, business leaders, scientists, people in the arts and health and education. Like 2 weeks ago, we had Andy Burnham. About a month ago, we had Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter, and he gave us this huge interview. It was brilliant. And then only 3 weeks after that, he showed up on Desert Island Discs. So they're really good guests. So check out the Possibility Club wherever you get your podcasts. It's really good. Oh, brilliant! Annie Marie has just put a link in the chat as well. I have been, and I still am, Chris Thorpe-Tracey. You can find me if you visit bordercrossing.substack.com, which is my email newsletter, or I'm on Twitter at ChrisTT. I'm quite feisty on Twitter though, I warn you. On behalf of ABCD and Always Possible and all our speakers, thank you everyone. This has been super fun. I've really enjoyed myself. Have a lovely evening. Take care of yourselves. Fish and chips time.